Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of UK Edu Stories. Now, you might be thinking we're missing somebody. If I just do something very quickly here now, you'll recognise that my co-pilot, co-host, compadre, co-friend, co-host, Bukky Yusuf, isn't here this evening. Well, that's a bit of a lie, actually. She is here, but she's on the other side of the fence this evening. She is coming in as a guest on the show. Tonight's episode, which I'll explain about in a bit more detail in a moment, is one we have two guests. Really excited to hear and learn from them. Our focus this evening is thinking about how to be a good pastoral lead under a global pandemic. And I'm really, really pleased to be welcoming Poonam Dave along with Bukky onto the show this evening to answer some questions about pastoral leadership. And goodness knows, haven't we needed to have some really clear and supportive work with our young people over the last 10 months or so. It's been a really difficult year for all of us. So as always on UK Edu Stories, we really do welcome interaction and engagement from our audience. Welcome to you this evening, joining us from wherever you are in the world. Please do join the chat now. I'd love it if you could just pop in and just to say a little hello. Like I'll ask our guests in a moment when they come on. I'd love you to just come into the chat now and just say a little bit and say who you are, what it is you do. Those sort of things. And as always, we're very happy to bring your questions and comments into our guests for them to attempt to answer. Our approach, as always, is to try and catch people in rather than catch them out. So please do join in, say hello, tell us who you are, where you're based, what you do, all those sort of things. And whilst you're busy beavering away and sending through your messages, telling us where you are and all these sorts of things, I've got a bit of an announcement. And we've already shared it a little bit already, but I'm just going to bring a little image up on screen that I am super, super, super excited, as I know Bukky is. And I feel bad, actually. I feel like I should just bring her in just for this little bit and then take her back out again. In fact, do you know what, ladies and gentlemen? I think I'll do that. I'll bring Bukky in quickly, because I feel bad, because it's something we both worked really, really hard on. So I'm just going to bring Bukky in now, and I'll do the how are you bit in a moment. Okay, but we're really, really pleased to share with you about something that we've planned for our episode on the 10th of December. And just doing a little bit of a drum roll. There's no actual drums. I'm just using my fingers, Bukky. But if I do the drum roll, if you could do I'll bring it up, and then if you could do the announcement, is that okay, Bukky? Your microphone's off at the moment, though, Bukky.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yes. I'll make the announcement.
Okay, my drumming stick getting a bit. Okay. Here we go.
Yes. So, as Mark has already said, on Thursday, the 10th of December, from 5:30 until 8 o'clock, we are running our very first Teach Meet UK Edu Stories, and it is going to be a fantastic evening of laughs, presentations, advice and guidance shared by a wide range, diverse number of educators. Our keynote is going to be held by the very fantastic Dr. Jill Berry. So I think that you'll see it's going to be great. There will be prizes, there will be laughs, as I say, so it'll be, great opportunity for us to engage as we make our way towards the end of what has been a very challenging year. So I hope you can join us on that evening, and we'll share further updates of who our presenters will actually be nearer time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're keen to join us, then Bukky and I are going to be tweeting out a link to a form where you can sign up to join us and present on the evening as well. We've already contacted a few people and asked them if they'd be interested in joining us. And shall I just do like maybe 3 or 4 people who've agreed to join us?
Yep,
can I do
yep,
that? Is that okay?
Yep, I think so.
Yes, I can be triply sure on these names. I'm very pleased to say that Howell Roberts will be joining us and presenting on the evening. I'm very pleased that Pete Sanderson, Lesson Toolbox, will be joining us. There's somebody called Bukky Yusuf who's going to be presenting. I'm not quite sure who they are.
Not sure. Sounds like a bit of a shady character to me, Mark.
I hear that she is a shenanigator, Bukky.
Oh, absolutely. 110%.
We've got Jules Dolby, Patrick Otley O'Connor, Tom Rogers, Zena Zenanos, Aretha Barton, lots and lots of people, Nina Jackson. So really, really excited to be hosting a Teach Meet, albeit online. But as Bukky said, it's going to be a great opportunity to get together, have some laughs, share some great teaching, learning, and leadership ideas. And, given the year we've all had, I think it's something that we all need, which is why we thought it'd be a really lovely way to try and sort of see in the end of the calendar year, just before the Christmas break. It'll be our last episode before Christmas. Obviously, we'll be back after the new year. But please do join us. Make a date in your diary. Share it with your teams at schools. 10th of December at 5:30 till 8 p.m. And just so if you wanted to grab a little screenshot of that, I'll just bring that back up a little bit now for you to have a little look at and make a note of. So there you go. Thank you so much. So as I was saying, tonight's episode, and as if by magic, Bukky's disappeared. Oh, with the power of technology. I feel like some sort of magical technology wizard here with all these controls. But with great power comes great responsibility. So I'll stop messing around now. Tonight's show is one which I think is really, really, really important. And so it gives me great pleasure to bring our two guests onto the show this evening. And one, obviously, already, which is Bukky Yusuf. And our other guest is Poonam Dave. And here she is now. Welcome, both of you. How are you both? How are you doing, Poonam? Are you okay?
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very, very good indeed. Welcome to the show. How has your week been, Poonam?
It's been very, very busy, eventful. I can't believe that we're at Friday already, but yes, very, very busy.
It's one more day until the weekend, thank goodness. And how's your week been? You've been busy too, haven't you? Speaking at events.
Busy, yes. So the EdTech Summit, which was absolutely brilliant, I have to say. Hosted two discussions yesterday while at school. So popping in and out of lessons, it was a real juggling act, but it was a great event. It's busy, as Poonam has actually said. And I have to say, I shouldn't wish time away, but I'm glad the weekend is very nearly here. It's a time of year, isn't it? It's a time of year where you're just hanging on, limping on until Christmas. 4 weeks to go. It's cold, it's dark. Yeah, so just trying to keep positive nonetheless. So
I think in any normal situation we would be edging towards Christmas, wishing for Christmas to come, but I think even more so now with COVID and the pandemic. Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. To do a bit of a shout out to our audience this evening. We've got a few people who've responded to my request. We've got Sarah Hazel. She was a guest on the show very recently. She's saying, hi, I'm a science teacher at Shoot Education. So welcome to the show this evening, Sarah. And we've got Nikki B joining us, Nikki from Essex, who's recently started as an educational consultant after 30 years in the classroom, a former head teacher. Loved learning from these sessions, and she's a big fan of Jill's. That's great news then. So looking forward to you joining us for the Teach Meet as well, Nikki. And welcome to Aim Flores as well. She says, hi, everyone. She's an ESOL teacher. So welcome to Amy as well, joining us here on the show this evening too. So look, ladies, before we sort of dig into the nitty gritty of the questions and things this evening around what you think makes a good pastoral leader under a global pandemic, and that's a big question in and of itself. Could you just explain a little bit, please, about who you are, what you do, and the context in which you work, please? And I'll start with you, Poonam, please, if that's okay.
Yeah, so my name's Poonam, obviously. I work in a girls' school in Barnet, so Copthall School. I have been in pastoral care for about 8-9 years now. Yeah, I love it. And I'm a director of learning. So I previously was a head of year. So I previously was a director of learning. And now I'm a senior director of learning. So I oversee year 7 to 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of responsibility there then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And how about yourself, Bukky? What's your context? For those who don't know
Okay,
you.
so those of you who don't know me, unusual context. So I'm a senior leader in a special school, and I actually work on a part-time basis, 2 days a week. And I have responsibility for teaching and learning, curriculum development, as well as science. I also am a qualified coach, and I'm an educational consultant, primarily to do with edtech aspects as well as science. And mainly for the science, it's at GCSE Key Stage 4. So I'm usually brought in year 10, year 11, just to help with intervention and to secure, grades and things like that. Yes. And other than that, I obviously get involved in lots of different educational events because I'm part of a number of grassroots organisations, including Women Ed, BAME Ed, and Teacher 5 a Day, the wellbeing initiative that was created by Martin Rea. So yeah, lots of fingers and lots of pies. And obviously, yeah, it highlights my love of teaching and learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Bukky. Thank you very much for that. And I know, being a friend of yours, just how not only well respected you are in the education space, but also how busy you are with all the various aspects of the work that you do. You didn't mention as well, you're the co-chair of the Department for Education's EdTech Strategy Group. She is involved in lots and lots of projects. So some great experiences there. Jump in with the first sort of main question, though, and I'll direct this one to you, please. Poonam, and it was really interesting in the sort of show chat that we had, hearing about your background. So for our audience, could you just sort of share a bit about what made you decide to become a pastoral leader, please?
Yeah, so after I finished my degree, the plan originally was to do my PGCE, and I got my place at the institute, and I was going to go on to do that. Yeah, so I did all of that. But in the final year of my degree, I decided I do not want to do any more education. I'm going to go off to Australia for a couple of months, which turned out to be a year. And then I came back and worked in as an exams officer. I did that for a couple of years before I just managed to happen upon a PSO role, a pastoral support officer role. And once I got into that role 8-9 years ago, I was hooked. It was just that one-to-one connection with the students just got me hooked, and I've been doing it ever since.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Interesting route into it as well.
Yeah,
I was talking with I did a webinar yesterday, in fact, with the Israeli embassy in London, exploring how EdTech's been used and developed during the pandemic. And one of the guests on there was a gentleman called Salim Tariq. He's OBE. He's the man in charge of family and children's services in Leeds. And he started by saying, he's got a very important job. There are, something like 190,000 children within that area, lots and lots of schools, all the rest of it. But he started as a social worker and didn't think he would actually, do what he did and end up where he is, and sort of moved into the role and things. And sometimes you find that people who work in this space actually sort of fall into it and love it, and then, like yourself, sort of move through it and progress. Bukky, you work in an interesting context in your classroom in school role. Could you share a little bit about how pastoral sort of links into what you do there, please?
Well, because a school it's an unusual setting, so it's 14 to 19 setting, and it's a special school. We mainly have a lot of students who've got complex learning needs. The pastoral, we don't have like heads of year and things like that. We don't even have form groups. But basically what it means is the fact that every single teacher has a really thorough understanding of the context in which the students actually operate within. So in terms of, like the context on, situations and things like that outside of school, a very good understanding about their learning needs and what we need to actually put in place to support them. And what we used to do on a regular basis pre-pandemic was actually meet on a weekly basis to actually just go through and make sure that we were aware of any situations that had arisen, maybe a change in the family context or home situation and things like that. And also revisit the EHCPs, the educational healthcare plans, to make sure that we were delivering curriculums that enabled our students to learn and to be successful learners in whichever context. So obviously you've got wide range of abilities but we needed to make sure that we delivered very personalised curriculums and personalised learning opportunities. So we had to have those regular conversations and meetings to ensure that what we did was fit for purpose.
That's really interesting, Bukky. Thank you very much. And it goes to something. It reminds me of a conversation we actually had on our literacy show, Bukky, which is great with the team from Team English and others, sort of saying how we're all sort of teachers of literacy. We're all teachers who've got, regardless of whether you've got a tutor group or not, or a form group, whatever you want to call them, whether in primary or secondary or even tertiary, I think we've all got a role to play when it comes to ensuring the well-being of our young people are at the forefront of our minds. I mean, and one of the things that was sort of drilled into me when I did my BEd was this idea around loco parentis. And if you are in place of parent, then surely that must mean that you are looking out not just for the academic needs of your young people, but for the welfare of them and everything that sort of encapsulates. Just want to do a shout out to Sam Keys, who said some nice things in the live chat via YouTube. Says, amazing to see, and former guest as well. Thank you for joining us again, Sam. Amazing to see fantastic educators with such challenging and busy roles still giving their time to support the education community. Here, Sam, and thank you for sort of taking notice and paying notice to that by sharing that message with us this evening. Thank you so much, and thank you also for joining us. Jumping back into the questions then, could you, Poonam, just share what a typical day is like for you as a pastoral leader? And I guess that is kind of a, whenever is there a typical day as a pastoral leader may well be your response. But could you just share, the sorts of things you have that come across your table every day?
So there's the standard things that I guess that we would do every day, like as a director of learning, as a senior director of learning, you would go into form times, you're visiting the girls in the morning. I work at a girls' school. So it's having that one-to-one time, you're pulling out students in form time about possibly talking about why they were late to school or behavior points or something like that, or going into form time to praise the students for doing well. The day before, we have something called e-praise points, so you're giving them shout outs during the day and stuff. But otherwise, no day is the same. Absolutely no day is the same. One day you could go in with 10 things on your to-do list, and well, actually more than 10 things on your to-do list. And if you've managed to do maybe one thing from that to-do list, then that's probably quite a good day. But otherwise, it's a lot of communication with parents. It's phoning the parents back. If there's an incident, unfortunately, that happens, it's picking that up and dealing with that. And then safeguarding as well. All the directors of learning that I work with, we're all designated safeguarding leads as well. So we deal with quite a lot of safeguarding. And I suppose currently in the pandemic, it's stepped up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I say no two days are the same. I think that's true actually for most people involved in working with schools. I mean, I can remember teaching the same content to multiple classes. Let's say I had 3 year 7 classes, and I was covering the same content. But again, the characters you have in every class means that no two lessons are literally ever the same, are they? I think that's one of the things, I don't know what your thoughts are, Bukky. I think that's one of the things that attracts me to education is the fact that not only do you get the opportunity to help people and help young people and all that sort of stuff, but I think it's lovely that actually that there are no 2 days the same. What do you think?
I agree. It's the fact that you never know sometimes what you're going to expect, and obviously you've got the core things like like the regular timetables, the students and staff and colleagues that you actually meet, even wider members of the community that that you are familiar with. But you just never know what you're going to face. And I'm laughing because I'm just thinking about some of the things that actually happened this week. But it's great. I mean, I have to say, and I think that's part of the reason why I do love it. And I've been teaching for a number of years, so. It's still great. And I think, as you say, for me, it's like a vocation. But the students particularly, I mean, I work with great colleagues. The students are what bring, I suppose, the greatest joy in spite of the challenging context, because they just make it really worthwhile, particularly when you have those light bulb moments. So it's slightly going off topic, but you may have those lessons where you plan it to the nth degree and it just doesn't go according to plan, and sometimes it goes pear-shaped. You just think, God, what was that all about? Or you may have to like a pretty like dry or standard lesson, and you just maybe have like one spot that just generates the interest and clicks the learning with the students. Those times are really magical as well, and I love those as well. So as I say, never sure what happens, what to expect, but it does certainly keep you on your toes.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I completely agree as well, Bukky. And that's interesting, actually. That leads me on to my next question, which I'll field to you, Bukky, if that's okay.
Okay.
Because you mentioned those days where things go pear-shaped, and they do go pear-shaped sometimes, with best will in the world. And it's obviously outside of our control sometimes. Your situation, as you say, in the school you work in, can be quite challenging. How do you balance that when you've got responsibilities to be delivering classes, but then working with some of the children that you work with, some of the additional needs that they have? And through our conversations as well, I know how difficult many of them have found, particularly those who've got things like conditions like ADHD, where consistency and regular contact and regimes and structures is super important. How do you balance the demands of actually teaching with some of the more pastoral things that you have to engage with your learners? How do you go about balancing that? Have you got any strategies you can share?
I wouldn't say necessary strategies. I think first and foremost, having a great team who understand the context of the students. To work in a special school, it's I think the patience that you need, the genuine desire to see the very best in your students, in spite of some of the behaviors that you see that may prevent learning. You've got to be able to see past that. And I think you need to have that in abundance. But I think the team is core, so that we realize that we're all together in this. And obviously that would happen in a mainstream setting, but you really it's not like, oh, one person's having an issue. It's like collectively what can we do to make a difference. I think also planning your lessons, and that may sound really straight, oh, of course, it's quite obvious, but making sure that you plan your lessons in ways that hits the learning needs, also hits the learning needs of the students you have. That does raise expectations. So you've got things in place if things don't go according to plan, but it builds in the routines, the learning expectations, the expected cultures in terms of what is expected. And just having lots of conversations. You need to, from our context, you really have to understand you have to bring the EHCPs, the educational healthcare plans, to life. They are not just documents that stay on the shelf, or that you might dip into on like in the shared drive or secure area on once on a rare basis. You have to bring them to life. But as I say, unless you have the conversations, with staff, you don't know how to do that. And we are lucky in the fact that the school community, so parents, carers and guardians, they often are engaged with the conversations in you set them out in appropriate ways, and we take insights, but it's the school community that has to work together. So it's lots of conversations, transparency, information being passed on, the communication channels are open, because we ultimately we want to see our young people succeed.
Thank you very much for that, Bukky. And it's really clear how important then communication and transparency is so important around all the sort of the key stakeholders. Just following up on that, Bukky, under the pandemic, did you find that technology actually helped with that sort of communication, the meetings you have to have around it? Because I'm sure under normal circumstances, actually bringing all the key people together into one place to have those important conversations probably was quite difficult. Has technology helped with that?
It did. I'll be honest and say I was really worried. And I think that's why going into the first lockdown, I was really stressed, because for some young people working through technology, I'm an EdTech advocate, so of course you can do everything through technology, but not quite. So working through technology did not work. It wasn't appropriate for them. It did not suit their particular learning needs. So I was worrying, thinking, well, how could you, if you've got, say, for example, kinesthetic learners, so they need to have the resources in their hands to feel it and move it around. How's that going to work in, a virtual context? So that was difficult. So what we did in those particular circumstances were actually make sure that we got resources out. So for example, I remember one particular science lesson, where I had the textbook as like a workbook, going through it. The student had the workbook as well, and we were just working through it. But it was a tangible resource we could actually work through virtually. That did work. Other than that, on the whole, the tech really helped, but it enabled us, for example, to, we have obviously the relevant safeguarding team who could connect with the parents, carers and guardians to find out, first and foremost, how they were and what we could secondly do to support them. And then thirdly, to find out what was in place in terms of supporting remote learning. So we made it really, really clear that they mattered and their children, mattered as well. Once we had the information, there was a lot of regular conversations. So, for example, we had daily briefings at the start and the end of the shortened school day, so that we knew we could talk about any particular issues and then, round up at the end of the day. But it also enabled us to be kept up to date if there were any changes or circumstances. For example, there may be some students who found it difficult to engage, so us not to be alarmed, but maybe to use, for example, Google Classroom to deliver asynchronous lessons, but making sure that we saw that the students actually connected with it. And at the end of every day that we taught, we had to fill in a spreadsheet so that the key person member of the senior leadership team was able to see who engaged, who didn't. And if any concerns were flagged, it meant we could actually immediately act upon it. So the teams behind the scenes were working incredibly hard, particularly my head teacher, to shout out to her, because she was basically on call from the very first day of the lockdown all the way until we actually had summer break, because, again, to make sure there was regular connections and communications with parents, carers and guardians. But the tech really did help.
That's really, really interesting. Thank you, Bukky. I'll jump over to you in a second with a similar question, actually, Poonam. But I just want to say a comment from Sarah saying she agrees, Bukky. She says it's like a constant feedback loop where you have to constantly adjust and change to meet the students' needs. So thank you very much for that comment, Sarah. Poonam, going back to what Bukky was saying about what happened under the lockdown, I was wondering if you could share during the first lockdown, not the current one, during the first lockdown, what were the things as a pastoral leader that you had to sort of quickly put into place? Because it turned around really quickly, didn't it? It was sort of the Wednesday, there was talk of it, but a Friday, it was lockdown, wasn't it? So I think March 1st. So
I think when we got sort of whiff of it, I think the whole country sort of knew what was coming. So when we got whiff of it, we were just making sure the students knew all their logins, password, using form time to prepare them. We've got over 1,000 students in the school, so it's using that time to prepare them. Do you know your username? Do you know your login? How can you access our system so you can get up to do the work? And then behind the scenes, we were preparing sort of our pastoral area where we had all our communication log ready. So when we did go into lockdown, we had teams that were, the directors of learning were making the phone calls to the students. The first 2 weeks was really just making phone calls. Can you access this work? If not, it was then liaising with the IT department, resetting logins, things like that. And then liaising with our wellbeing team, which includes the DSL, our mentor and our counsellor, to touch base with all our vulnerables. And then we were liaising with the curriculum leaders and our teachers as well to say, this student's a little bit vulnerable at the moment, or having some, concerns with logins and things like that. So it was keeping them up to date with the work, because we listened for, we got a lot of student voice during the first lockdown. So the students expressed that they were worried about sort of online learning and things like that, but they liked like voice over PDFs and PowerPoints and things. So we use that student voice, and that's how we managed to teach the girls. And then they really enjoyed that, in fact. So it was more keeping up to date with their engagement. Are they accessing the work every day? And then as directors of learning, we were also phoning home. So, sometimes where parents where students were asleep, so we were waking them up. We're saying to parents, give the phone to your daughter and I'll get her out of bed. And then we were making them wake up to go and sit in front of the computer.
Fantastic. I don't know how I managed to do that, to be honest. Trying to get young people out of bed. I struggle with my own children enough as it is. So getting others to get out of bed would be a difficult thing. In a world where we have had this experience, obviously, and we're in a second lockdown at the moment. Were there, moving from the one, and sorry you haven't got this question, but I'm sort of just leading on in the way that the conversation is going. Were there some things that you that didn't work in the first lockdown, and from what you learned from that first lockdown? And it's lovely to hear that you've been using student voice to inform the way that you sort of worked and supported them during the first lockdown. But the question I want to ask really is, what did you learn from that experience, and what have you brought forward that you will try and that you still used before we went into our second lockdown? So things that you learned that are good practice that you think should work, regardless of whether you're during the lockdown or not, and then anything that you sort of carried on and did into the second one, and things perhaps if you're able to sort of share those things that you decided to completely ditch because they weren't working quite so well.
Yeah. One thing that there was a lot of emails in the first lockdown. So if I was going to be emailing one student's teachers, there was just a lot of emails flying around. But with this lockdown, and actually, to be fair, we did it over the summer to prepare for the recovery and reintegration. So we created a key players document of students that were a cause for concern before the lockdown, and that came up during the lockdown as well. So students that were struggling to sort of settle back in and were vulnerable for various reasons. And it's a live document, so it's constantly being updated with interventions that are being put in place and the impact of those interventions. And teaching staff at school are constantly dipping into that. The one thing that we've done a lot of before this lockdown is training the students on how to use Microsoft Teams to prepare them for live teaching. So for example, I also look after year 8. So my year group are at home self-isolating for 2 weeks. So we're having virtual form time. So where I'm not having to contact every single student, the form tutors are doing that first thing in the day. And this morning we did it, and there was only 20 students out of 160 who didn't attend form time, which was amazing. And then it was just meaning me dipping in saying, why didn't you attend? And it was usually a technical issue. So it was more the training that we did before this lockdown. And then it was using the tutors more. So it wasn't just the pastoral leaders that were doing it. It was honing in on our tutors as well.
That's really interesting. And I love the term live document. I'm making some assumptions, but I'll drill down into that a bit if that's okay. So by live documents, I'm assuming you mean you're using the power of the cloud. So you're putting documents into Word online, for example. Is that right? Is that your approach? Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm to be honest, we've always had OneDrive, but I don't think anyone's ever really used it that much. But since the first lockdown, it's a game changer. OneDrive, it does amazing things. I can't believe we have never used it as much as we have now. But yes, it's just about constantly sending out the link. So we have something called Cocktail Connects where we send out to all our staff once a week, and we also share stuff in head teachers briefing on a Monday. But so it's just about sharing that link every now and again to remind teachers that it's there and they can continuously check it.
No, that's so powerful. I mean, I remember a time when I was sort of working on whole school policy documents, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourselves, both of you. You know, you start working on it in Word and you'd save it as whatever V1, and then you'd send it to somebody else and they call it V2, and then it come back to you in another email, be V3 final, and then you'd find something and tweak it and you call it V3 final, and then and it would just keep pinged around, and then you'd have multiple copies and nobody would know which was the right version. And you're like, oh crikey! Then you have to have an hour meeting just to work out what to do with the different versions. Using the cloud the way that you're doing it is such a great way of doing it. Thank you so much for sharing that. How useful you kind of explained a bit, but would you go back to working how you used to work in that respect?
Oh, I don't know. I don't feel like I would. We still use our shared area for a few things, but when it comes to like a whole staff thing or a whole team thing, we OneDrive, because you can use the comments box on the side. You can, it's just everyone can edit it. Like you said, there's no moving around from version 1 to 15, or you don't have 8 different versions saved in the shared area.
That's brilliant. Thank you very, very much indeed. Bukky, I've got a question for you, and you kind of responded a bit to it within your previous question when I had that follow-up for you. But how have you and others in the school sort of helped students that have found remote learning a challenge? You talked about, Bukky, didn't you, about sending out those? But I mean, again, your context is so interesting. Have you got any other examples of how you supported students?
Yes, so we did it in a number of different ways. So, for example, with regards to tech, we found that some students, they had the facilities at home, but they couldn't quite use it. And again, that's to do with like their learning abilities and things like that. So we had to think, okay, how are we going to teach them? So, for example, as I've mentioned in previous discussions in other forums, for practical subjects, say like for example art, we may have used say WhatsApp and again, it was a safeguarding team who were involved in this, so that there were no exchange of numbers, telephone numbers or anything like that. But it basically meant that we had a parent, carer or guardian in the lesson with the young person, and they could actually support the learning or just make sure that everything was okay, from a tech point and things like that. But what was really good in getting a lot of parental engagement was the fact that they could see just how hard we worked. And just before the summer holiday started, they praised us collectively, saying, what a wonderful job we did as a school community, because they really could see the difference we were actually making to student progress. So that was lovely. Some other instances, in addition to that, we had to have some young people who really struggled being at home. The lockdown, loss of routines, not getting up in time for the lessons, or sleeping. It was really hard. So we had staff, again coordinated through the safeguarding team, who would actually socially visit at home. So they wouldn't obviously go in the house and things like that, but just to make sure that they engage with the students, so they could actually see, the connections we found. All the young people in our school really responded well to seeing their teachers through video lessons or hearing their voices and things like that. And so we knew that if they could actually see us, that would make it would make a big difference. So we strategically had staff who would actually visit some young people as well as their families, just to say hi and see how things were, and just have a conversation to make sure that they were keeping well, and where relevant, actually undertake some lessons. So for example, as the lockdown measures were being lifted, it was really important for some of our young people to engage with physical activities. So you may have lessons and things like that in local parks near to where they were, and we had staff on hand to do that. So we had to really think on our feet and really be inventive and creative in how we could actually engage the learning. But yeah, those are two examples that spring to mind in the first instance.
Well, thank you very much, Bukky. And that for me sort of reinforces the research which talks about the importance of relationships. And relationships come through connecting, and it's been lovely hearing one of the consistent themes through all those examples you've been giving me is about the different ways in which you've sustained those actual super important connections, and not just with the learners, but actually that triangulation of care between home, child, and parents. So home, school, and child, in that sort of way is super important. It's lovely to see that sort of common theme running through all of it, and sort of doing everything you can to sustain those relationships. Thank you so much for sharing those examples, Bukky. Just a question for you now, Poonam. Some people sort of have certain sort of feelings, I guess, about people who work in pastoral, or assumptions. That's probably a better word. Assumptions about people who work in pastoral. Assumptions about people who teach chemistry. Assumptions about people who teach ICT and computing. I am not Sheldon Cooper. I really, but geeks do get this kind of this sort of label. Just think about yourself in your role, Poonam. Are there any sort of myths that you know of that that sort of come up, and sort of shared with you, any sort of common myths about a pastoral role?
I think that as a non-teaching pastoral leader, I think it's sometimes easy to think that just because we're not teaching, we have endless time, that we can just do everything in one day, and I think also sometimes students think that we can just wave a magic wand and just fix everything. And sometimes some parents think that as well, but I think that's the main thing. I think it's about people thinking that we have a lot of time, which we don't, not all the time.
And I said, like you alluded to before, you could have a to-do list like this, and you're lucky if you get to one of those things in any sort of given day.
Yeah, I mean, I usually have I've moved away from paper, and this year I've been very good with having an Outlook diary and things like that. And I have my to-do list in OneDrive, and it's massive, it's huge, but I highlight the things that I want to do that day, and it's usually about 2 or 3 things. And I usually can probably cross off 1 or 2, and if I do that, I'm happy.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much for that response, and it certainly sort of mirrors my conversations with other people who've held these roles before in the past, and my experiences too. I'm just mindful as well, thinking about you were saying about using your Outlook diary. Have you come across a tool called Microsoft Planner?
No.
So a little bit of homework for you after the session this evening. You might have a little look at Microsoft Planner, which can tie in and link through. And obviously, there's a clue as to what you can do with it, with your time and things in the name of the tool. But I think it would definitely be worth your while exploring it. A great place to go for learning about those sort of things is education.microsoft.com. Where there's loads of free training. You'll be able to sign in at that website with your school email and password. You'll be able to get straight in there. And there's loads of free training on how to do all those different things. But I think you will find it very helpful with sort of scheduling and organizing those things there. Bukky, I'm going to jump into you with your question. I know how passionate you are about your job, but could you share with me, please, and our audience, obviously, what do you enjoy most about your current role?
Oof. Are you talking about specifically within school, or the different things?
All the things that you do in school.
What do I like about it? Oh goodness. I think the fact that you can really see the impact that you made. And it sounds cliche because you can see that within any context. But with the young people that we serve, some of them have not had very positive, in fact, many have not had very positive school experiences. So to be in a place where you can actually help to change that, help to build confidence levels, help to make them feel successful, and see, we have to, sometimes as well, let people put in the context, sometimes it may take a long time to see tangible progress. But when you see, like on a daily and weekly and monthly basis, differences that you can actually see for young people, that is magical. And I do love it. It can be hard because sometimes you're having to, you're having to work through a number of different issues that are barriers to learning, which explains why they are within the context, that we operate within. But I do like that. And the fact, going back to what I said earlier, no 2 days are ever the same. So even when I'm not at school, for example, like today, I had a conversation with a member of a senior leadership team just to find out, okay, so how are things, how have things gone and things like that. So because it's no 2 days is the same.
Thank you, Bukky. There are two things there that I really loved in your conversation. But I'll start with the one that I loved the most, really. And I think I mean, you said a lot in that response, but there was one word that you used in particular, and you might be sort of, I know what he's going to say now. But I think it really goes to your values and your approaches and everything in education. And that was the fact that you talked about the children that you serve.
Yeah.
And so, and different people have different ways. Somebody might have responded and say it's the students that I teach, or the students that I lead, or the students that I do. But that idea of servant leadership for me, I think, is so important, and certainly mirrors my own values in education as well. It really shines through that you see these people as people, and again, it's so lovely to see that tangible. So I can see the delight in your face, because the memory shooting through your brain of these children that you've been able to help and support in your school. Mm-hmm. And like you say, it is magic, isn't it?
It is, and it's also humbling as well, because I've been teaching in mainstream for a long time, and I don't mind where I work, to be honest. So long as there are young people there to learn, I'm there. So I don't really mind the context. But I knew going into teaching a special school, I didn't really know much about how to really help the learning of students who've got complex learning needs, and that's why I went in as a learner. So even though I've got X number of years of teaching experience, I came in as a learner because I wanted to learn so that I could actually do an even better job of teaching science, particularly, when you mentioned, I teach science, everyone's like collective groan, and like, oh my God, I hate science and things like that. But one of the most humbling things is when you learn from the students. So even if you have a bad lesson, the learning didn't, the lesson didn't go according to plan, or the research didn't work in a particular way, and you try and find out how could you make it better. When I love that, because I'm also a learner as well, and that's why I use the word serve, because I'm just thinking, we collectively in my school, we use our talents, our skills, what we bring to the role to make sure that our young people are successful and they can go on to, the next stage of wherever they want to go. So it could be apprenticeships, it could be college, whatever it is. That's how I see it. And when you put yourself in in the position of a learner, it means that every day you can always pick up something. I had an Ofsted lesson in February where it's, which could potentially be, young people I found really difficult to engage because they're complex learning needs, but I'd worked out by this stage about what helped them to learn. And so to see, the student responding and working independently was powerful and magical. But the Ofsted inspector, without blowing my own trumpet, because it's not me, as I say, it's learning from the students. They picked that up and said, "Oh, you noticed this, and you could see when that happened, and you did this and did that," and it was even mentioned in the Ofsted report. I have to say that because that could have been potentially, I could have said, "Oh, you can't teach these particular children, or they've got particular needs that it can't be done." But we found a way, and it wasn't always easy. But I have to give a shout out to some of the special schools that allowed me to come in and learn and see, okay, how do you make it work so that you provide outstanding teaching and learning, so that you enable your students, young people to feel, as I say, successful. And I was able to bring that back in. So yeah, it's great.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Bukky. Cheers. I want to ask you the same question, if that's all right, Poonam. So the question is, what do you enjoy most about your role?
I think it's exactly the same. So where Bukky mentioned about she's serving, she's serving the students. For me, when I talk to the students, and if I'm telling them off about something, or if I'm talking to them about their grades and their studies and stuff, I refer to me raising the students. So I say, that's not how I'm raising you to be a young lady, or me and your parents aren't raising you to be like this, whatever. So for me, it's very much, and I didn't. People used to say to me all the time that you would really see an impact of your work with what the girls do, or the students do, or their grades they achieve and things, until I got my first year group and I saw them through to GCSEs. And really seeing that transition from where they were in year 7 and 8 when I first got them to getting amazing grades in GCSEs, and I really saw that my work had a massive impact on them, and it's just watching them grow into young women.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Poonam. Thank you for your comment at the bottom there, Sarah, as well, sort of mirroring what Bukky and Poonam have shared here as well. Speaking about academic progress, Poonam, do you have any sort of specific systems in place in your school to track academic progress that you could share with us, and how you sort of utilise that information to support your interventions?
Yeah, so we when we have data drops, we as directors of learning in the team, we work very closely with the teaching staff and the curriculum leaders. So we do a full scrutiny of the data, and then we sort of pinpoint out which parents we want to meet with. So based on the academic data drop, we then have sets of meetings, and then we'll really break it down. What are your barriers to that lesson? If you've got a 3 in that lesson, why do you think you're getting that 3? And then it's feeding that information back to the teaching staff and seeing what else we can do to support. It's something as simple as I get distracted at the back of the classroom, or I just don't understand the work. That then leads to liaising with our SEN department or our wellbeing team, and then it's not just leaving it at that. It's then going back and doing sort of round robins with the teachers based on the interventions that we've put in place, going back to the student, is it working? Do you feel like that we need to do something more? And then again, connecting back with the parents. So, and then we're sort of forcing them to go into interventions, and you should have been at English intervention on that day, why didn't you attend, sort of thing. So it's just working very, very closely with our teaching staff, parents and the student, just to see what else can be done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Poonam. That sort of leads me on to thinking about sort of the vulnerable students you have in your school as well. Obviously, we're not going to talk about specific examples, but based upon the sort of academic tracking of progress and all the rest of it, and again, being in a very unusual situation this year, which we couldn't, a year ago have sort of mitigated for this year. But linked to that, what sort of plans have you had in place this year to try and support your most vulnerable students in your school?
So again, we have, like I mentioned, we have our key players document where we have the different levels of need for the students. But extracting from that key players document, we have our high level, our high need students, and I created a document called our emotional support plan. And within that, we put a bit of context for the staff and again, that's a live document that we can keep on editing. And we put some information around, the background to that student, what their barriers to learning are, how they present in their barriers. So whether or not it comes across as being withdrawn or behavior or not coming to school, and then giving staff the techniques to be able to support that student in lesson. We also then call upon our wellbeing team where we have trusted adults and we have support plans. Mm-hmm. So they have a real strong approach to our vulnerable students at the school. We have a lot of one-to-ones with the students. The directors of learning check in, the wellbeing department check in, form tutors do check in, and then it's all recorded on our on the safeguarding. We use CPOMs. So we have a track of everything we're doing for that students, but it's constantly talking to the students saying, what else do you need from us? Like if we had all the money in the world, what could we do to support you to, be engaged in school or just to be happier, really, a happy learner?
That's really interesting. Thank you ever so much. Linking into that, how do you communicate that sort of information back to parents? Because obviously, as you know, it's important to have that sort of triangulation that I mentioned before. How do we go about sort of bringing all of that back and involving parents in that important loop there?
So when we write that emotional support plan, for example, we write it in partnership with the parents. So we write it and then we say, this is what we've put in. We have parental views, we have student views in there. And, if a parent wants to say, well, I don't want that to be in there, but I want this bit of support instead, can we offer this? We work very, very closely with the parents.
Fantastic, thank you. And obviously that's so important. Over to yourself, Bukky. How do you sort of keep in touch with? Have you got any sort of specific systems that you use to sort of stay in touch with parents, carers, and guardians?
We, as I say, so what I've referred to as like the safeguarding piece. So we have specific members of staff that are the only ones generally who communicate with parents, and so. They as I say, there are regular conversations so that we understand about what's going on, any updates and things like that, and that is communicated in a relevant sense to staff. So that's pretty much it. But it, as I say, it's regular, so that and by regular, a daily basis, so that if something's actually happened in the evening or something like that, and we need to plan for that. To support the young learner, then we're ready, and we're primed. So as I say, it has to be as constant as that in order for us to do what we need to do.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Bukky. Poonam, Bukky, we are not at the end of the show quite yet, but we're not very far away. Just want to do a bit of a conversation with the audience. If there were any questions you wanted to fire through for our guest this evening, now is your last chance to do so. Please do fire them through in the chat if you want to. Failing that, though, I have got some more questions. Due diligence. Bukky writes the questions, so more people know what's coming, to be fair. But I have got plenty more questions to be asking them. And the next one is really, and I'll jump this one in for you first, Poonam, and then I'll ask you this exact same question, Bukky. Are there any pastoral leaders that you know of, maybe through following on Twitter or some books you might have read, or even just a star colleague who you look at, and I've had plenty of those. How the heck, I know I'm pretty good at what I do, but how on earth do you do what you do? Are there any pastoral leaders that you know of that you'd like to do a bit of a shout out to? That some of our viewers might be interested in finding out more about if they're sharing some of the great work that you do. And I'll ask you first, Poonam, and then I'll come over to you, Bukky.
So in terms of, it's a difficult question. So, well, the other heads of years at the school, so the other directors of learning that I've worked with, the previous heads of years, I've not lost contact with the people that I've worked with in the past. So that's how I'm sharing good practice. Also I've met a lot of people through Twitter. So I've met different heads of years and things. I'm in a group on Twitter with lots of heads of years, and there's just constant communication about things like that. But I actually shout out to the head teacher that's at my school. She's just won head teacher of the year. And she started off, so that's Evelyn Ford. So she started off as, she was a head of year. So a lot of the stuff that she does is with that pastoral hat on, and she's got, the passion that she has and the things that she wants to do, you sort of pick up on that and you get ideas from her and things like that. So yeah, I think Evelyn is probably my biggest shout out.
Thank you very much, Poonam. And if you're somebody watching this evening, we have got a few questions come through now as well, which I'll jump into just after you've had a chance to respond, Bukky. But if I am a head of year, a head of house, or somebody with pastoral responsibility and wanted to get involved in that that group that you've got, Poonam, are people able to get in touch with you and see about joining in with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's in that group is always open to inviting new people in and getting new ideas. So yeah, definitely.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. The same question to you then, Bukky. Who do you want to do a shout out to?
Oh, so two people. So first and foremost, Maria O'Neill. Yeah, at pastoral_leader. I think she really helped to raise the profile of pastoral leaders in the last few years, and has put, so many different things. And she is actually, I think, delivering a lecture to some pastoral leaders or something like that online right now. Brilliant lady. But I agree with what Poonam said about the fact that really it's difficult to talk about pastoral leaders you don't actually work with. And I was thinking back to some of the pastoral leaders I've actually worked with, but a particular shout out to someone who's been a former guest on UK Edu Stories, and it is Susan Kukungu, one of the most phenomenal pastoral leaders, head of the year I have ever come across. It's brilliant watching her in action and the systems and strategies she actually put in place. Brilliant. And her Twitter handle is at Sue Happiness. Someone, as I say, I have an enormous amount of respect for. So yeah, definitely shout out for her.
Brilliant. Thank you both for your great recommendations there. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. We've had a question from, again, former guest on the show, someone who I really respect as well. And that's Corrine Latham, who's the head teacher of CV Primary School in Northern Ireland. She asks, best ICT pastoral system you've used and how do you record incidents? Would either of you like to respond to that?
Yeah, do you want to go, Bukky?
I was going to say our systems are very simple. We use Google Sheets so that it's a live document and we can actually keep a record of certain things. Where things are more confidential, obviously, they are kept in a different way, but mostly, we use a lot of the Google apps and we secure different ones as and when necessary.
We use Sims. Sims is, it's simple looking, but it actually does amazing things, so that's how we record all our incidences and things like that. But CPOMs for safeguarding is brilliant. Yeah,
I second that. I used CPOMs in a previous school. Phenomenal. Really, a really excellent application. Sorry?
It does the job for you, just pull reports and things, yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, really easy to use, intuitive. Great. Yeah, I think that's a really powerful system.
Thank you both for that. I can suggest lots and lots of different ones, but I think it's far more useful because you've both got recent experience of using this, and particularly for yourself on a regular basis, on a daily basis even. Sorry, Poonam, in your job, I think it's far better for you both to make the recommendation rather than me just sort of throwing a whole list of product names out there, because it's so much more authentic, isn't it? If you've actually, two people sort of really singing the praises of CPOMs. I mean, it does mirror the feedback I get from the schools that I work with as well. So hopefully you found that response response helpful, Karine. And actually, she comes back and says that she uses CPOMs. So there you go. So but it's lovely to get a bit of balance checking, isn't it? And she also gives us a little smiley face as well. So thank you so much for that question. We're just approaching the very end of the show now. I'm just going to ask one final question to Poonam now. What advice would you give to anybody who is thinking about getting into pastoral leadership?
Anyone who wants to get into pastoral leadership, I would suggest just keep going, and take every opportunity that comes your way. Whether or not it's, being asked to be a mentor to students, taking a role as a form tutor, seriously, take every opportunity that is thrown at you, because that will just keep increasing your experience and then being able to become a pastoral leader, definitely.
Brilliant. And did you have any advice on that front at all, Bukky, as well?
Not really. No, I think, I can't share anything above Poonam. I think that, the experience is really important. I think, understanding the pastoral role from different perspectives is really important when you go into leadership. I think that will serve you well.
Yeah, great advice. The only thing I would add really is perhaps, if it's possible, maybe to do a bit of sort of job shadowing. That's an activity I did with a previous colleague of mine that I found it really, really useful prior to taking on a pastoral role myself. It really did highlight for me the highs and the lows of the job, because whilst you've mentioned those magic moments, Bukky, and I'm sure you have them, the many wonderful moments like you've mentioned with results and so forth and so on, Poonam. For every great moment, it's not the easiest of jobs. It's a difficult job, and I've got a huge respect for you both in the roles that you have. So thank you very much for your interaction, engagement and responses this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you also very much to all of our various members of our audience who sent through questions and comments this evening. Thank you to Sarah and Karine and Nikki and Sam and Amy and everyone else who's been involved in the show this evening. We're looking forward next week to a really interesting show, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of move myself out of the position of interviewer and you've become me, Bukky. Would you like to share a little bit about next week's show before we end this evening?
Yes, so next week's show is a special edition, I suppose, of UK Edu Stories, where we actually invite 3 authors to talk a little bit about their books, and they've all been published by Bloomsbury, so thank you, Bloomsbury, for publishing next week's episode. We have James Hilton, Maria O'Neill and Abby Mann. So it'd be a great opportunity to hear about the books they've actually written, what's inspired them, key messages, and great opportunity for our audience to actually ask questions and get them responded to during the episode. So I hope you can actually tune in next week.
Brilliant stuff, Bukky. Thank you very much. And I don't know if you've seen the email, Bukky, but our contact at Bloomsbury has actually been in touch to say there's a possibility they can give us some copies of our 3 authors' books to give away.
Oh, wow. I have not seen that yet. Wow.
So please do join us again next week, where you'll be able to, I hope, otherwise it's going to be a lean Christmas in the Anderson household with all the books I have to buy. The opportunity for you to win copies of books by our 3 guests next week on the show. As always, Thursday evenings, 7 till 8 p.m. And one final little reminder, please do keep this date in your diary, the 10th of December. It's 5:30 till 8 p.m. Teach Meet UK Edu Stories. We're so pleased to confirm the keynote from Jill Berry. I had a meeting with Jill over lunch today, in between things at the conference we were both involved in today, virtually, of course. But so pleased he's confirmed that, and super excited to learn and hear from her at the event. Please do keep that date and time free in your diary. We really look forward to you joining us for what I hope will be, what I know will be an absolutely brilliant evening of sharing, laughter, fun, surprises and prizes. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to Bukky coming on as a guest for a change. You'll have to flip it on me sometime, Bukky.
I look forward to that.
And to Poonam for taking time to join us this evening as well. I've really enjoyed hearing your insights and everything you've had to share this evening. Thank you very much for taking the time. See you next week on UK Edu Stories. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.